And welcome back to another episode of Boots on the Ground, where we share insights into Israel's war, politics, and identity. As always, thank you to our partners here at Jerusalem Media Group and to our sponsors at Be There Israel. For all those times you can't be here, they can have you covered and make you feel like you're here even when you're there. Today we're joined by Marc Rosenberg, the VP of Diaspora Partnerships at Nefesh B'Nefesh. We're going to have an interesting discussion about Aliyah and war, what motivates people to come to Israel, during war, not during war, and everything in between. Marc, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Honored to be here.
It's great to have you. So, Marc, before we get started, what brought you to Israel? Because you definitely weren't born here. What brought you here? Where'd you come from? What's your Aliyah story?
So I have a typical story for most people in the sense there was like a Zionist upbringing. I went to public school. I was a public school kid, and I went to Jewish summer camp where I got this infusion of ideals. I had a Zionist house. I remember my mom having some Hadassah fundraisers.
Okay.
And my camp, we sort of got a taste of Hebrew and meeting Israelis. But I went to Hebrew school where I really was taught to be illiterate, to really read Hebrew and not understand a single thing.
Right.
So I was a little bit like conflicted about, is this a real country? What's going on? I was definitely proud of it. Definitely one of the proudest moments of my childhood, I remember, was marching in Washington, D.C. for the freedom of Soviet Jewry. I remember that was like a Zionist, a Jewish upbringing that I had a lot of pride. And when I was 18, I went to college. I didn't really want to go to college. I was a little bit lost about what I want to do. I had to commit to study something. And I even remember my mom saying, do you want to go to Israel on a program? I was like, no. I'll go. I'll figure it out. And that very first Shabbat at college was this like crossroads for me, because I grew up with a family that always had Friday night dinner. And here I was on my own the very first time. What was I going to do? Was I going to go to the Hillel house? Was I going to just figure it out on my own? Was I going to hide? And it led me to ask lots of questions about what it meant to be a Jew, what it meant to be myself, and really take on my own identity. And I had two older brothers that were definitely influential on me, and both of them studied politics, and they spent their junior year abroad in Israel. And I heard about that plan, but I was like, I'm going to be different. I'm going to be an English major, and I'm going to go to England to study. I was going to follow after Shakespeare. But the more time I spent in college and grappled with the politics on campus, I went to GW, Washington, D.C. There was a lot of tension between what's going on with Israel and pro-Palestinian groups, and following along this storyline, eventually I decided that I should really go to Israel. I used to say my junior abroad was the best year of my life. My wife is very insulted when I say that. So now I say it's one of the best years of my life. Yeah. And I definitely came back after that year, transformed with this idea that I definitely want to live in Israel for two main reasons. One is when I went back to the United States after living in Israel, I didn't feel I fit back in so easily. I definitely identified a little bit more with the Israeli mentality, the casualness, the dugriness, the speaking directly to people. It definitely helped me in my graduating early and negotiating credits. I got bitten by that Israeli identity a bit when I was there. And the second thing that I only have the words to say now, I couldn't articulate this when I was 20 or even when I was 25, when I eventually made Aliyah, is that I really like this idea of living a Jewish life out loud. My experience of living on college campus, it was great friends, great people, a great community to be a part of. But what I really was drawn to in the experience of Israel was just being, however it meant to be Jewish, and just getting the sense of holidays, whether you did it or didn't do it, that it was just this magical experience. So after finishing my degree, I became a teacher. I worked for a couple of years. And when I was 25 and single, I packed up and I made Aliyah.
Did you study in England in the end?
I didn't. Hebrew University it was.
There you go. So you make Aliyah, and then you started working at Nefesh right away, or you were a teacher?
So my transition, I was a seventh grade English teacher in the U.S. And I
oh wow, that would have been very tough here.
It was inner city kids. It was really great experience. Really, and I had got my degree was to teach English as a second language also. So I was going to come here to be a teacher, and I was able to transition to a great job working for a gap year program here for American kids studying here after high school before college. Originally as a counselor, then as a coordinator, and along the way they're like, wait a minute, you know how to teach, and I eventually joined the faculty for them. So I had this dream job for like the first 7 years in Israel, working in English, working with Israelis, being at this touch point experience for people to experience living in Israel. Some of them wanted to stay, some of them wanted to go back. So I had my foot in the education world, and I did that for the first 7 years. We had a contractual dispute. They wanted to change the terms. I didn't think it was so fair. And we agreed to part ways midway through the year. This was like February. So we said, we'll finish out the teaching year. Okay. I had to tune, and I'm going to look for another job. And this really brings me into the Nefesh B'Nefesh story a little bit, because I made Aliyah by myself. I was 2001. Nefesh B'Nefesh had just started. You had to apply for it. There were certain dates you had to apply for. It was very, very formal. It was a foundation at the time. And I was like, I don't need their help. I have an older brother here. I'll figure it out.
And I went down that road too.
I went down that road, and here was the problem with. So I was like, I'm going to teach. So I started interviewing at these teaching jobs, and I got offered 2 jobs: one at one school in the morning, one school in the afternoon. But no one could tell me how much money I would make. So I called up the Department of Education. They're like, we can't tell you. And then I called up the teachers union. Now I know there's a person at Nefesh B'Nefesh you call up, and they're like, wait a minute, you need to sort this out. We'll help you do it. And they just tie it like a bow to clarify it. So I'm struggling to saying this at this time. My wife is pregnant with twins. It was great. They're now 17. We had bought an apartment that 2 years ago that was finally ready. We were ready. It was ready, and we were paying rent and stuff. And I needed to know how much money I was going to make. So I started opening up my job search. And I was working at credit card companies and sales, a lot of different jobs. But I felt as a little bit like a fraud, because I'm like a teacher, an educator by training. And a chance meeting, one of my adoptive families, because when you move here by yourself, you sort of connect with these people. They said, you should speak to this woman, Rachel Berger. She works at Nefesh B'Nefesh. She is the job guru of what's going on. So I called her up, and I pedaled my bicycle over to meet with her. And the short version of it, she said to me, so what's your skill set? I said, I'm a teacher. And she said, no, that's a profession. And she yelled at me for 10, 15 minutes. And after that, I was able to articulate that my skills are, I'm a good writer. I'm a good editor. I'm comfortable standing before large groups of people. I like to connect with people on a smaller one-to-one basis. I'm very creative, and I can translate complex ideas so people can understand them. She goes, oh, that's great. That's also the skill set of someone going into PR and marketing. Now, both my older brothers who studied politics are in PR and marketing. So I was like, no, as much as I tried to avoid the path that they were on, going to Hebrew U and going into marketing, here I was, and I started interviewing at these jobs, and I found a job on the PR team, eventually at Nefesh B'Nefesh, and that was almost 16 and a half years ago. And I've done lots of different jobs with them, but I found my way to using my skill set as an educator and teacher to help people through the Aliyah process.
All right, so that's who Marc Rosenberg is. Well, let's talk a little bit about Aliyah. You work at Nefesh B'Nefesh. For anyone who doesn't know, Nefesh B'Nefesh is the organization that brings immigrants from North America to Israel. And as someone like myself who made Aliyah before Nefesh, I didn't even know it existed at the time in 2001, then I went to deal with every single government office on my own. And it was an experience. And it helped make me who I am today.
That's what that's what they told us. Oh, it's an experience. You would have to go to the office. You have to go back again. You have to go back again. Yeah.
We can argue whether it's good or bad. I think it was, for me personally, it was a very important part of understanding Israel. And really that experience was very important for me to have on a personal level. It's not for everybody. It's not necessary. It makes everything way more difficult and way more unpleasant. Nefesh today takes care of all of that for you in a comfortable, calm way, and fairly efficient, and definitely from where they started till they are today, it's worlds of differences. But let's talk about what motivates people to make Aliyah. Like, I know for myself, I had a very similar upbringing, very Zionistic home. I grew up in the Orthodox community, but also went to public school. And Israel it's either stay in America and go to college or go to Israel. Those were the options for me after high school. I grew up with that passion, that Zionism. I know it motivates me, but you deal with Olim from all over North America, not just from major Jewish communities and from New York, like myself. But what's the overall motivating factor? What is it that drives people to leave their comfort of life in America to come to Israel, jump into this big unknown? Things like you say, they're very direct. They could be crass at times. They could be unpleasant, but they could also be extraordinarily fulfilling. What is it that motivates people to pick up and move?
So there are a few motivations, but I think if we want to take a step back and look at the bigger picture, I think what's fascinating is that often the first reaction that everyone says is actually not it. It's like the red herring when it comes to like Scooby-Doo, like, oh, that's the obvious person to do it. You're like, oh, and you scratch at it. It's like, that's not the reason. So the first answer that most people think is ideology.
Right.
Okay. And I think that someone like you is actually an exception to the rule.
Okay.
You're an outlier on the Aliyah revision.
My mother will agree with you on many, many accounts that I'm the exception to the rule.
But you're often put on the pedestal as the typical example. And what I want to say is that people actually think, and this is from reading lots and lots of people's essays, which they submit with their Aliyah applications, and meeting with hundreds of people a year who are interested in exploring Aliyah. They often feel as if that someone who's a true Zionist, so you have to have a Zionist ideology to make Aliyah. You have to be Avram Avinu to do it.
Okay.
Okay. Do you feel like Avram Avinu when you came?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. In fact, they say that they look at the people getting off the plane, okay, and they're like, oh, that's a hero. Those people are heroes. And you ask the people this, they will often say, it's a heroic decision. It's heroic to go out of your comfort zone to do it, but I am not a hero. And when we put the people on Aliyah on a pedestal, they're like, I'm not Avram Avinu. Oh, that person's ideology is different than me. Now, if you look at some of these Zionist camps that are out there, I'll choose the B'nai Akiva camps, the Moshavas, okay? And you say that they are rah Aliyah, and you ask...
Look at the percentages, how many campers make Aliyah.
They will feel that the number is very, very high. And I will tell you that the percentage of 15% is a very high number, but people feel that it is higher. Or you talk about certain schools, they will feel that it's very, very high. Well, Camp Ramah actually has a slightly higher Aliyah ratio than the Moshavas. It's interesting.
Not surprised.
It's not. Well, it's surprising to some people because Aliyah is all over Camp Moshava. You drive in, they actually have in Camp Moshava Nefesh B'Nefesh's logo on a plane on one of the letters on the camp.
And we used to joke around as campers that at night they'd like whisper over the loudspeakers,
correct.
Make Aliyah.
So
and then I worked there, and it's true, they do it.
So it's on a playback feed or in Simon, but it's a great story that we tell ourselves that, oh, these people have this ideology that they are going to come, and I don't have that ideology. Well, I think that my brother and sister and my family and friends, actually, and I have family in New Rochelle, I have a family around the country, they have the same ideology and love of Israel that I have. So what we see in these essays of people that are coming is that their motivation is really comes from a practicality of it. It's shocking for people because often people, right after the ideology question, especially since October 7th, the question I get is, oh, is the rise of anti-Semitism in North America driving Aliyah? And the answer is, no, it's not. People see a knee-jerk reaction. Oh, if there's this rise, people are going to feel more comfortable in home in Israel. And anti-Semitism has never, especially from Western countries, has never been a driver for Aliyah, and we hope to be not proven wrong.
Well, it's also because anti-Semitism in the West has never been connected directly to violence against the Jewish communities on a large scale. Anti-Semitism in Russia, Ukraine, wherever in the past, Germany, meant death to Jews.
So we live in
anti-Semitism in New York right now. It's unpleasant and horrible, but you're not dying.
Well, so that's a nuanced understanding of it. People, especially with social media, it's amplified in such a way that people feel as if, or my impression in living in Israel is that there are school shootings happening all the time in America because I read about it, and people they take this one incident in Squirrel Hill or it happened in Muncie, and it creates a pattern of story for certain people that creates this especially for Israel, because that's what we hear about. We hear about the rising anti-Semitism, and then Israelis ask, oh, is it going to lead to Aliyah? When the reality of Aliyah is a very practical decision, especially for people who have a family, okay? Right. Especially for retirees over the age of 55, 65. They have to make sure that they have a fixed income, their health care is going to be resolved, and their kids are in school. It comes to a reality of this option that's going to be there for them. So what's amazing about Israel as a project, okay, which we're now in their 75 years and plus, is the project has evolved from the stage of more than 100 years of draining the swamps. And really, if you think about
draining the swamps.
Literally, if you think about the millions of Jews, literally more than a million Jews left Russia from 1880 to 1904, that was the big push. 1% came to Israel. That's the big wave of Aliyah to America, of immigrants. Because the Israel they came to at that time was a difficult project. Okay, now we talk about Israel already in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. It's a different type of project than draining swamps. And Israel today is a totally different place when it comes to what is needed to make Aliyah here. So the ideology of those people who came in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and we see a small trickle and some drafts on the chart of Americans who do come after the Six-Day War and maybe after other wars, that there's spikes of North Americans that are coming here. When the practicality offer of what this project is offering, there are people who are ready to be a part of it, and the people who really say that, we have the gung-ho Zionists, they're going to come, they're going to leave it behind, and they're going to do it. But the chunk of people that are going to come are people that practically it makes sense. And I just want to throw one more factor out there, is it's the storytelling that confuses us. It's the modeling. We take certain stories in our schools and camps of these certain people that came and they sacrificed everything and they were the great heroes. Unfortunately, a lot of those people in the story died.
Yes, okay? They went back to America.
It didn't end well, and we're like, they came and they sacrificed everything for it, and they fell in battle, or it didn't work out for them. And these great stories, and therefore it puts the pedestal much, much higher. Whereas we realize, and I'll just use an example of this, the preeminent example of like Aliyah for certain people was the kibbutz movement. And I still get a phone call every few months by someone who's like, I want to come in Israel and I want to live on a kibbutz, because they've heard these stories. Right. Of how great the kibbutzim were and how idealized were. At the height of the kibbutz movement, what percent of Israelis lived on a kibbutz?
5%.
8%.
Oh, it was 8%?
At the height. But the story that was told by the socialist country was, this is the ideal model of what we really have.
Right. People forget. As someone who lived on a kibbutz for almost a year and a half before I went to the army, it's very comfortable. It's easy.
Today, it's very comfortable.
Today, but at the same time, you have no independence or freedom. Like your work schedule set might not be the job you like. You have no say over any of it. Like, it's comfortable and nice because you have you have total security, and you have a very, very set, specific sense of responsibilities, and you have no independence. There's no individualness really on a kibbutz today. So it's nice. It's a pretty picture, but it's a very extremely different than what you're used to in the United States.
Kibbutzim don't want other people because now they're all for profit and they want to keep it in. So the story was a different story. So what we're seeing today is there's been a shift from people who realized, okay, just like the kibbutz isn't the story, and reality, most of those people were living in Tel Aviv. Right. They were actually capitalist, the majority of people, but Israeli TV would not let them on. They were controlled by secular white Ashkenazi men. That story is broken. We have much more diversity on TV, much more diversity in society, and it's causing people to see greater practicality for their options of coming and building their future. And therefore, the maturity of Israel is drawing people in, that they see this as a place of growth, they see it's a place of their future, a place of giving, a place of community draws people in, and a sense of meaning. One of the biggest commonality to your question, what's driving Aliyah, is they feel that they have a meaningful life here. It means both on a Jewish level, they feel as if part of their Jewish story is here, but also the society allows them to be more meaningful in what they're doing. Israelis are very authentic. Okay, Israelis don't talk about their jobs so much. They was really, where am I traveling to? What am I doing with my family? Oh, I have a bris at 3:00. Take off from work for that. They love the quality of life is drawing people up, and the sense of meaning jumps out to be the biggest factor for people making Aliyah. And when you reverse engineer it to say, oh, do they feel like they don't have a meaningful life in America? Well, then some people say, oh, I feel like I have less meaning, or I feel as if I'm willing to go out of my comfort zone. I'm willing to move away from family for the opportunity of being an immigrant.
So the question now begs to differ is how big of an impact, or how big of a piece of the puzzle is the economic side of things, is the ability to earn an income based off your expenses of life. For example, just for an example, a person with 4 children paying, Jewish day school tuitions in the U.S. versus someone coming here and paying the tuitions that we pay for our children, compared to income potential there and income potential here, housing market costs, how much of a piece of that puzzle is the economic reality in Israel today?
It's a huge part of it. But the problem is you're speaking dollars to shekels. And very few people have the concentration or clarity to understand to run those numbers. So people will hear these phrases, oh, I understand you make less money in Israel. Oh, I hear Israelis live in meanness. Okay, right. That people. Now, there are some people in Israel making more money. They're the exception to the rule compared to America. And yes, Israelis are living in minus, which means they're in overdraft. But you know how you translate the word overdraft to American? It's called credit card debt.
Right.
Okay?
Okay.
But people aren't doing that. People don't run the numbers to understand that, oh, Israelis make less money, but actually Israelis bank almost 30% of their salary to pre-tax savings.
Right. Well,
Which
that's
you-
why I asked the question in reference to income versus expenses, where I recognize that the incomes are different, but the expenses are also completely different.
So one of the things that we've seen, and we work very hard with people exploring Aliyah, is to run those numbers and have those conversations. We have a great budget calculator to speak to people. Israelis, and I think this is one of the things that you understand about it, Israelis are very, very direct. So I'll use a story. My sister lives in New Rochelle, New York. Okay, I visited her a couple months ago. She says, "Oh, the house across the way just sold for $1 million." I'm like, "Wow, what did they say?" She goes, "I didn't talk to them." How did she know the price? Zillow. Okay. So in Israel, okay, we would say, how much did you sell it for? Oh, you got a deal. You did this. We talk about it directly, and but they pretend they're not going to talk about it, but everyone knows the price. Here we talk directly about it. So part of the obstacle for people is that they're so curious, but they're afraid to ask. They're afraid to really check it out. So they see the size of the Israeli classrooms. They're like, oh, that's not, I couldn't send to my kid like a soy, but without looking at the quality of it. They are not comparing. They're comparing. They're not comparing in a very clear way. So when you actually run the numbers and you look at it, it can come out to a need to explore the possibilities. And that's where we're seeing the slight surge in Aliyah over the past 5 years specifically, is that people are saying, wow, especially with telecommuting. Okay, I can transition.
right.
I can transition with my job, or I can still work a little bit to bring in extra income because my job gives me satisfaction as well, or comfort. But people are exploring the quality of life here, especially because now we have these cell phones. It's not like the day. It's not like the days where my wife moved here in a year that started with a 1. Okay, she was very young. Okay, and she says the only American product that she recognized was Coca-Cola. Now we get Cinnamon Toast Crunch and Heinz Ketchup, all the stuff that's out there. So you can have, literally, my blessing is the best of both worlds. And now Amazon sort of delivers here. So, but it's not about Amazon delivering here. It's actually when you look at the practicality of what your budget is, what you're costing to invest in your future, and the other push. And this goes to what you talked about education. The push for some people to do it is they look at the product of what they get after spending over $100,000 on their child's education in the United States if you want a formal Jewish education for it. Okay, and they look at the education that I'm paying for my child's Jewish education here in Jerusalem for it, and you say, okay, the investment that I've done on that and the options of what they're going to choose to do, and the person they do is, wow, there's something about the system here in the startup nation, in the Jewish country. I like that. I want my kids to be like that. I want my kids to be like those type of people who are ready to serve, or ready to volunteer, who have that sense of responsibility. And it's that type of role modeling is attracting more and more people to come.
So that actually leads into what I was just thinking about, is a lot of the times as my grandparents both survived the Holocaust, immigrated to America. So they immigrated, again, for their own personal well-being, but as most first-generation immigrants in any country, they're not coming expecting to be the most successful. They're coming because they're looking to create the most potential for the next generation, for their children. Is there a big block, you think, with people making Aliyah thinking that they're going to just transition one to the other, and they forget that they're still first-generation immigrants here? So I know I'm a first-generation immigrant. I came here when I was 17, but I fully integrated, served in the Army, continue to serve today, and I don't feel like an immigrant until every randomly once in a while there'll be some cultural thing that I don't get. I was even just on an Israeli game show, a lot of cultural questions. I made it through 8 out of 12 rounds.
Impressive.
Yeah, I was impressed myself. I didn't think I was going to get that far. But there's a concept, is there like this lost idea that immigrants here, that they sort of feel like, well, I'm Jewish, so I should just be here like everyone else. And they forget that they still immigrated to Israel. They didn't immigrate to Jewland in the end of the day. And there's a cultural shock that they have a hard time getting over. Or am I just seeing something that's not really there?
It's a great observation, especially for you as the model, because you are what they call in the literature passing. Can you pass as an Israeli? Can you dress the part in your Blundstones or whatever's in the army? Could you be in the army and someone wouldn't know that you're American, and then you open your accent and they'd be like, oh, I get it. You might be able to do it for a period of time, and then you say that one word off, or you don't know that in this, and people
but I can also do the English like I'm from Israel, and it's okay, you know?
I have a friend whose daughter did that so she could get an easier grade in English for Hebrew speakers in high school. She would fake the accent to be able to do that. So two things. One is it's a very important observation that's often overlooked by people, because we have a fancy word for immigrants to Israel. We call them olim. We call it Aliyah, this ascent, this magical idea for it. And therefore therefore one of the things that the Nefesh B'Nefesh advisors have to tell people is that this is immigration. First of all, about the bureaucracy, about the paperwork. You have to do this, you have to do this. It's not just like you snap your fingers. They should accept me. Why do I have to prove I'm Jewish? Because this is identity theft. You need to show your ID and the names need to match up. This is an immigration process. It's fast-tracked. So you should appreciate that it's fast-tracked, but you need to prove your identity. And the second point that you put onto is when they get here, as much as they would like to do it, and it takes time, there are ways that people will eventually integrate, but it's very, very difficult to do it. And there are times, I'm here 23, 24 years here, and there were times that I remember I once brought a group to Har Herzl on Yom HaZikaron, Israel's Day of Remembrance, and I definitely felt like an outsider there, okay? And then many years later, I started bumping into people I know, how you doing? And I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm in the circle of people who know people who fell. I know this, I'm comfortable, I know where I'm going. There's times where we feel an insider and outsider. But as an immigrant, okay, you are always a little bit of an outsider with the language. What I encourage people to do is you have to learn how to dance it. You have to learn how to embrace it. My name, you introduced me, is Marc Rosenberg. When I made Aliyah, I had a difficult choice to make when I landed at the airport and I had to sign up. Should I be Marc Rosenberg, which is soup? Okay. Should I be Moshe Nachman, which is my Hebrew name? Okay, but I really only get, Hebrew school is that name. And I eventually decided to add to an aleph to my name to be Mark. So people would not call me so. So I'm Mark. So I'm constantly introducing people to Israeli. Ani Mark lo Marak. Israelis love the joke. But I'm announcing right away that I'm an immigrant. And I'm comfortable with that. So you have to do this dance with, this is who I am. I know about this. I don't know about this. But your point is, it's a strong one, is that you yourselves, and once you have friends and I have children, they're constantly aware of that my Hebrew is a little bit off, my sense of humor is a little off, the way I dress, and I have twin daughters. One is totally embarrassed at everything I do, and one is this is who you are. It's really, really great, and it's a dance I do. But it's something you have to realize that this is an immigrant process. And when you think about it, if you think about my experience in America, those Russian Jews that came over that had the funny accents, that's me. I'm the guy with the funny accent.
And I was looking at success when my 14-year-old son corrects my Hebrew. Abba, you should just know that's Zachar not Nikeva, or whatever it is, something I've been saying for 20 years some way. For me, that's like a badge of success. I pulled it off. My son is already going to succeed way more than I ever will here.
Professor Ruth Wise says, immigrants always move to a country where their life is going to be better.
Okay, it makes sense.
It makes sense, but we don't. So coming here, I'm still an immigrant, and therefore I'm trying to plan for a better life. And it's all the more so that the person who goes through the transition has the harder time. I think one of the conversations that's happening in Israel is that, the immigrants came and they built the country and then they transformed, and then the next generation just took it for granted for it. We get to look at the fruits of our efforts that we were able to do it, but you have to have the satisfaction for yourself. I'm that person. And therefore my blessing to people is that you have the best of both worlds. You're able to have the best of Western life and American values, you're able to do it, and be able to integrate that into the Israelis. And that's where we see the influence here.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you next was, when we look at immigrants, every immigrant brings something with them, right? When the country was being founded, we had immigrants coming over, and they were the labor force. We needed manpower. They were the labor force. They brought in, with that, they just brought physical labor with them. We look at today, when people make Aliyah, we look at, I think maybe you'll correct me, but there's different groups of populations that make Aliyah. Like I said, there's the younger people right after high school, after college. They're making Aliyah. They're coming with basic education, high school or no, or college. Then you have families, people in their 40s making Aliyah, and then you have retirees making Aliyah at the end of their life. What would be the greatest thing that each group is bringing with them that's influencing Israel? What effect can they have on Israel, on society, on the culture, on the economy? I don't know. You tell me where. I'm assuming each group would bring something different with them, but what is it that they're bringing to Israel, and why is it such a worthwhile investment for us as Israel to invest in these immigrant populations?
So I want to bring something that includes everybody. I think the commonality of North American Olim is that they bring a sense of community to Israel. And one of the hardest things about our advisors do is we try to explain that the word community means something different in New York than it means in Israel. Community in New York usually means a synagogue, and the people in the synagogue, even though there's 3 other synagogues around, okay, but the synagogue is the center of their life, and you don't need that in Israel because the whole country is Jewish, 80% of the country is Jewish, and you know that the holidays are coming around because the supermarket's announcing it, not the kosher supermarket, the general supermarket.
All the supermarkets.
And you don't need the shul to be the center of your life, and therefore it displaces people. I also heard a professor recently say that because of the secular foundations of this country, specifically try to de-emphasize religious life as the center of life, and therefore the national holidays that would have these ceremonies that people would go to as opposed to necessarily local synagogues. And therefore I think we see a revival in Israel, not just of religious life, one could say is definitely in the music that's happening, a connection to our roots, but the value of local communities and that building that comes on a fabric of people taking care of each other. Because I'll use one example. In a synagogue in Philadelphia, where I'm from, they have a Chevra Kadisha that takes care of the dead. Okay, if people volunteer to do it. Here, you don't have to do that because the city has a group to do it. There's certain things, visiting the sick, you don't necessarily have to do it. There's people at Hadassah Hospital that bring you meals on Shabbat if you're there. You don't have to be that person to do it. What we're seeing, especially since October 7th, is people feeling this civil space with a sense of, you know what, there needs to be more fabric here. Because that's what we used to do. And it was very, very hard for North Americans because they were so involved in community life. And they got here, and because of their Hebrew, and because of Israelis, they were, okay, we don't need you to do that. Okay? Right. And what we're seeing is that so many people got called up in the war, and there was such a big need for civil support that they started getting involved much more. And they're not going to go back. They definitely started speaking much more Hebrew, but this sense of building a sense of community, that local fabric that represents everyone, not just a few people, not just you go in, oh, they only have a Russian speaker in the Ministry of Aliyah there. No, we're going to make sure that there's an English speaker there to help people. There's that sense of pulling the fabric to make sure it's more balanced and represented. And you see that amongst every fabric, amongst the college students getting into college and making sure that there's something for them. You see it amongst the retirees, and you definitely see that in the schools that they're going. It's not just a few schools that the Anglos go to. They're going everywhere. They're pushing the envelope to make sure that they get the integrative support.
Wow. All right, so now let's go back to the October 7th question. October 7th, there's now, making Aliyah at army age. It used to be you go to the army, you do some guard duty. It wasn't like you're going to go fight a war. A lot of people idealize, like we talked about at the beginning, they would idealize coming to put up on the pedestal, the warrior, the soldier. You made Aliyah, the lone soldier. There's all these organizations now that didn't exist back in my day that support lone soldiers. We know that the lone soldier program at Nefesh B'Nefesh is probably the biggest lone soldier program in the country. And the question is how has the war affected that side of Aliyah? Was there now a greater interest, or is there more motivation at the age of 18, 19, 20, 25 to make Aliyah in order to come here and be part of the army and serve? And now not just serve, but if you're going to the army now, you're going to a war. Or is it, rained a little bit on that parade, whereas like people used to feel really gung-ho about trying to get up on that pedestal of being a soldier, but now that it's actually real, kind of like, maybe not.
So it's a good question. The short answer is it's too early to tell. We can say that from October 7th, Nefesh B'Nefesh has received a surge in applications for people who are exploring their Aliyah. The cycle for Aliyah is usually about 1.5 years for people to come, and therefore, it's the summer's the beginning. We're expecting 2,000 people to arrive this month and next month. So it is July, August is the biggest time when most people come. 60% of Aliyah comes in the summertime. Also, I want to point out interesting is that there was a surge in Aliyah in 1968 and 69, and 1974 and 75. Those were short wars, 6 days and about a month.
Right.
Okay. We're almost 2 years into this war, so the after effects of this are still too early to tell because the rumblings that are happening
are still happening.
But it's different. The speed of communication for this war, speed of communication that people get the news, how connected they are. In fact, I know family and friends that are more connected to the news cycle here, far away in North America and Canada than I am.
I am sitting right here.
And I need the distance a little bit, but they're like, oh, I heard this happen, I heard that. I'm like, I haven't followed that. We're seeing there's been a trend over the past already 5-6 years numbers of singles under the age of 30 interested in making Aliyah. Every year there's about 1,300 singles under the age of 30 making Aliyah. About 300 of them draft.
Wow.
Okay. At any given time, there's about 900, 950 North Americans in the Army. There are currently 3,500 lone soldiers that Nefesh B'Nefesh is supporting with FIDF, making sure that they have. Just an interesting stat as well. There's 500 North Americans did reserve duty since October 7th.
500?
5,000.
5,000, about to say.
So 5,000.
Because I have my own little mafia
Yeah, no.
of my former lone soldiers and Americans that served with me.
Many.
Anecdotally, we have a lot more than 500.
Many have come back. Nefesh B'Nefesh had the privilege of working with JNF and FIDF to bring lone soldier parents to come visit. Last year, a few months after the war started, 970 parents came to visit, parents of lone soldiers serving in combat. So there is a closeness that people feel. And in my travels in North America, I feel is that a majority of the Jewish community clicked 1 degree closer to Israel. No one clicked for, I've never been to Israel, I'm making Aliyah. But people who are thinking about it are thinking about it more seriously. People who are thinking more seriously move forward in their plans. And we're seeing amongst this population a surge in interest. And I think it drives from a lot of this. It goes back to what I said at the beginning. The search for meaning is a big part of it. And the war has been a value clarification for a lot of people about what Israel means. This generation, your generation that's out there, has been a surprise to some people, because everything we've heard about the rumors and the TikTok, and they're lazy, and there's this, but the sense of meaningfulness that people were talking about moving to these new communities to build up the Otef Az, that they want to be a part of this idea of pushing to places to be stronger and stronger, is an attractive idea. And build upon that studying in Israel is a great option for people. There's incredible options to an English program, to a program that switches from English to Hebrew. So these have been a trend that we're expecting that's going to increase. But specifically about the Army, there's been a slight increase. And it's interesting, because I just heard that earlier this week there was a graduation from the Air Force,
Correct.
And I heard someone say, "Ha ha ha! You missed all the action." They said to the people like, "You're not going to."
There's going to be plenty for them to do.
But they're like,
years.
"Ha ha! You missed the historic story about that." So there's always been these waves of conflicts, and there's always been a surge of interest after that. This has been something different. It's been transformative for people who want to be a part of that story. They want to be a part of it, and therefore they're running to something. They're not running away from something. They're saying, "Well, this is a story I want to be a part of," and I think that's like the message I want to get across. That we're trying to make sure that it's possible, and so much so that in general I discourage North Americans from serving in the Army. When they come up to me and they say, "Oh, I really want to serve," I'm like, "Do you know how hard it is? Do you know you don't get out every weekend?" Like we want them to have honest expectations about it.
That's my same approach.
But it's counterintuitive. People are like, "Why are you doing that? What do you mean?" Because we want people to know what they're getting involved in. When someone comes in and says, "You know what? Yeah, I'm turning 18. I want to draft next week and go in this unit," I was like, "It takes a year to draft. You don't just come and they put you in the army.
You don't speak Hebrew. Why are you going to get into that unit?"
You don't correct. You have to have that. You have to have a plan for it, and therefore understanding. Okay, right. I'm going to spend a year. Maybe I'll go to a mechina. I'll work on my Hebrew. I'll do some push-ups. I'll get the slang for it. Understand what you're going to get involved in. But we have a very educated audience. We have people that are coming and they're saying, "Okay, I know what I'm getting involved in. This is what I really want to do. And if I can do that, then it's a great asset. It's a great asset for the Army, and the Army itself is already saying, okay, you have this skill. Let's put people in the right place."
Okay, so now we're going to change direction completely for a minute. As I mentioned in the title of the show, we talk about war, politics, and identity. We've touched on war, we've touched on identity. I want to ask you a question about politics. Before this interview, we spoke a little bit, and you mentioned the study that you guys did at Nefesh in the past, that there's no real space for an Anglo-political party in Israel. And I respond to you saying that I agreed with you completely. As someone who's been involved in politics and is going to be back involved in politics in the near or distant future, that there's no one united political camp of Anglos, of the however many hundreds of thousands at this point of Anglo immigrants. We have lots of different flavors politically, but that there should be a significant Anglo candidate in each major party, especially a party that looks to be the ruling party, should represent this significant population. My question is how do you feel about the the place for Anglos inside of Israeli politics. What's your feel on it? Again, your opinion, not Nefesh B'Nefesh's opinion. This is your personal opinion. I'm asking.
So my opinion has evolved over time. I used to be an advocate, and I'd say I formerly voted for Natan Sharansky's Yisrael Ba'aliyah party because it was great advocate for immigrants to be able to do it. But eventually it fades away for it. And my knowledge of the political system currently as it is, and we had a Nefesh B'Nefesh Oleh who became a member of Knesset, and Dov Lippman. And when he was a member of Knesset, he opened up these hours during the day, like a congressman, that you could come in and you could share your complaint to him, and he would try and pass a law for it, which is how the American system works. It was brilliant. It's great. The Israeli system is not built for that because I'm a Jerusalem resident, and on whatever party is, they have a candidate from Jerusalem on the list. And once that party goes into Knesset, he doesn't really care about the Jerusalem citizens because he's already in.
There's no constituency.
There's no constituency for a city or a party. So it's not a formula in politics that way, especially because we have a coalition. And you run for your party, and the coalition forms a totally different treaty than the party. What I am for, what I've realized over time is, and I think it's the model, that I didn't understand what was happening at Nefesh B'Nefesh, because we have incredible partners at the Ministry of Aliyah, at the Jewish Agency, and they do incredible work. But what I think they've realized, and what we realized, is that there's a space in the not-for-profit zone that helps the government learn how to do it better, and helps how these bodies become more and more efficient, because we have the nimbleness to do things. And the partnership between the government sector and the not-for-profit sector allows for an advancement of change. Let me give you an example. Okay. Israel is in crisis need of doctors. Do you know why Israel is in a crisis for doctors?
They don't have enough spaces in medical schools. They don't. It's all controlled from the top down, not from the bottom. So we can get into the economics of medical school in Israel if you like.
There's three reasons of it. You named one of them. Number one is, it's fascinating, that all of the Russian doctors who came in the 1990s are retiring.
Right.
So we had an influx of physicians. However their language was, that's a workforce. Number two is Israel decided to up its evaluation system. So all these Eastern European countries that used to have medical schools, Israel says we are no longer accepting them, we're going to a higher standard. And the third one is the one you mentioned, is that Israeli medical schools did not acknowledge the population growth over the past 30 years and did not increase spaces.
Well, it's not the medical schools. You can't blame them.
The Ministry of Health that did not open up more medical schools.
But you're getting to the core of the issue of Israeli politics, where a medical school can't accept as many people as it wants, and whatever it is, there's a quota. They're only allowed to have X amount of space set by government policy.
Well, government policy that didn't speak to the population, Department of Statistics for the population of almost 10 million people. So they have now opened up 2 schools last year, 2 schools this year. It's going to take 5 years to graduate them. So what happened is, Nefesh B'Nefesh started 23 years ago, and we had doctors making Aliyah, and the doctor is board certified, and they came to Ministry of Health and they said, it's going to take you a year to get licensed. What is this board certified? They didn't. I don't understand the language you're speaking, and therefore we worked with years with the Ministry of Health so that they would recognize this level, and they would eventually even computerize so they can get the documents. So that we have doctors coming to New Jersey in March, finding about a few weeks later that they are approved and their license approved. So a week after they land on Aliyah, they can start working in hospitals. Wow. And so the Ministry of Health transformed. They improved it over years, and then they came to us about a year and a half ago, and they said, we need doctors. Bring about 4,000 doctors to Israel over the next 4 years, and we'll be able to graduate enough, and we'll get through this crisis. So we're working with our partners at the Ministry of Aliyah and the Jewish Agency to bring doctors from around the world for this acute crisis. And we have hundreds of doctors that we were able to bring, I think 560 just this past year from around the world to address this issue. Our know-how, how to do service, how to work with people, how to work with governments, how to make sure things are efficient, is this pattern that we see almost, we call this a Western American style a customer service coming to government efficiency. And you see that people are learning. They're skeptical at first, they understand, but the relationships that you make, and we've had over almost 12 different ministers of Aliyah since Nefesh B'Nefesh started. A lot of change.
They've all been very different, one from the other.
Different, but sometimes the people in the office don't change. You work with them, but you get a certain stability when you understand there's the level of politics that you work on. But if you want to make strategic change and talk about long-term change for the benefit of people, then it can be really done with a lot of focus and partnerships. So politics is one way to do it, and we try to we work to be friendly with all that want to help Olim. Okay, and it's really, really important. But there's a level of realizing that where the rubber hits the road, Okay, things are changing so fast in this era that we're in of smartphones, and there's concerns about obviously identity theft and make sure things are done in the right way, and that we can really do it. And that partnership is really valuable. And if you look around this country and you look at some of the fantastic not-for-profits out there, okay, I think 50% of them at least have North Americans involved in it. You look at something like Leket.
Right.
We're like, wow. You say Hatzalah came on the scene. You look at them, that they came on because there's a certain know-how or ingenuity or partnerships that come around for people who, first of all, they're outliers. They see something different. There's something wrong here. It can be done better. And they come and they're able to do it. So I would love to have the politicians to have local representation. I would love to have to have this Anglo representative. I think parlor meetings are great ways for people to learn about it. But the system function, the parliamentary system that we function on, my personal analysis is not the way to make the change.
Right. I agree. We'll see. We'll see what happens in the future of what Anglo candidates come up in the next election and how they can maybe bridge the gap between the private sector and the government sector to work together. Before we get to the last question where we stay on a positive note, I wanted to say, if you've been listening for this long and you're still here, you're clearly enjoying it, may as well leave a like and share it with a friend. And as always, we like to finish on a positive note, on an optimistic message, on something that you see as this is what's beautiful about the world today and give us a good feeling for the future. So what do you have to share with us, Marc?
It's a little pressure, but I would say that it's been a traumatic time. I mean, it's hard to put into words to people that live outside of Israel, even those who are very, very connected about what it's been like for the past 20 months. I said to someone that I lost track about how many times I cried in my car just by listening to the news or a song that came on, and just processing what's going on. It's difficult, but the sense of opportunity is really, really amazing. And when you think about the quality of people that we get to meet and we get to help, and the futures that are changed from being here, and the stories that we get to tell for being here, it's really amazing. One of the cliches that people say about Aliyah, which I never ever liked, was that when you make Aliyah, you're on the field, and when you live outside of Israel, you're in the bleachers. You're on the sideline, you're in the bleachers. It's a football metaphor, or soccer for those people in the U.S. Okay, and I was in my shelter, my mamad, in my during safe room during the Iranian war, and I'm like with my kids, and we're processing it, and I'm like, it's easy to say that when things are wonderful, and it's really, really wonderful, and you're like, but when you're thinking about a ballistic missile coming, and you've seen pictures of what that ballistic missile can do to a neighborhood, it's very, very real. But in that authenticity of what is real is really, really magical. Last week, I volunteered. I took a day off from work. I went to Petah Tikva with my wife and my daughter to a volunteer organization who went to help people pack up that were moving out of their apartments so the building could be fixed. Hundreds of people were volunteering to help these people inside their home, sweeping up broken glass. You can't get any closer to like authentic Israelis having this conversation about why you're here, why I'm here. Where are you from? I hear you have an accent. And realizing that we have a commonality of the story. And I like, you feel that groundedness, that sense of purpose, that meaningfulness that's there, that just like, even in the toughness, even in the dark moments of understanding that the apartment next door, a person was killed because they didn't go to the shelter, okay, it's so real. And therefore, I want people to understand that the idea of Aliyah isn't to get to the airport. It's not about a destination. Aliyah is a word of movement. And therefore, the Aliyah should continue afterwards. They should realize that wherever you are, if you're aspiring to get to Israel, okay, it's a process that you have to push to, you have to explore, you have to check it out. Okay,
it's a journey, not a destination.
And even when you get here, you have to continue it. You can't just take your boots off and relax. Okay, you have to be ready to do something. We have a lot to build. We have a lot to change, and that's the spirit, I think, of Aliyah. That people realize that no matter what happens, we're the confidence that we're going to come out of this stronger, and that we're going to go up another level. We're going to make this better than it was before, and that our children and the next generation is going to do something more fabulous. And I think that is the quiet story of Aliyah. It's like too often it's like, oh, we see these people landing in Israel, and you don't get to see the happily ever after, because when happily ever after happens, it's gets to the end of the story, that's when the movie's over. But if you go to those people's homes and you sit and you hear the stories, it's really fabulous. So I wish you should continue to be Aliyah.
Amen. That's a beautiful thought. All right. Thank you for joining us today. It's Marc Rosenberg, the VP of Diaspora Partnerships at Nefesh B'Nefesh. Thank you to our partners here at the Jerusalem Media Group and the sponsors for this episode of Be There Israel, for all those times that you can't be here, but they'll bring here there. Be There Israel. Thank you.
Awesome.